After Sean had bathed, a maid brought him food, which he ate greedily. He then drank some of the mulled wine and then went to sleep. 2 hours later he awoke, rose from his bed, and dressed in the fresh clothes that had been left for him, feeling refreshed and in need of some fresh air and the chance to think. Now, he thought, it is time to see exactly where I am. He had understood little of what had been said to him and still expected to see the town of Cadbury outside and his castle a short distance away. Sean was dressed in black leather trousers and boots, a fine pale blue silk shirt, and a black studded belt wrapped around his waist. He left his room feeling a little unsteady on his legs, the muscles unused to bearing his weight from his time in bed. He walked down the corridor and out into the courtyard beyond. Waiting for him was a large black mare, saddled and ready, just as he had requested from the maid earlier. It took Sean 2 attempts to get into the saddle. He was obviously weaker than he thought. He pulled on the reins, turned the horse, and headed out of the courtyard. There was no town or castle as he had imagined there would be. A large meadow lay before him, and beyond that, a forest of dense apple trees. Although this may have seemed unusual to many, Ardenval was famed in legend for its apples and their almost magical ability to provide sustenance when required, as a base preparation for a healing tonic, or even to be made into wine. I may as well start there, he said as much to his horse as himself. Kicking the horse to a gallop, he set off towards the waiting trees and possibly some answers to his questions. The sun shone warmly from a clear blue sky, and it refreshed Sean's spirit as much as his skin. Even if he found no answers, it was a beautiful day for a ride. He remembered many days like this in the past, when he had ridden out for the day with his lovely Giselle, his queen. His face saddened with the memory of her betrayal, and he knew that he would never see her again. No, he thought, I must not think such things. Someday, somehow, we will meet again. No matter what it takes, I'll get back to my kingdom again. For had Gaius not taught him that all things were possible, and had he not seen many things that other men had only dreamt of? The only way into the forest was a narrow path just wide enough to allow him to enter on horseback. This he took, and after a few steps it began to slope downhill, gently at first, then steeper as he went on. Sean picked and ate a couple of apples, which refreshed him immensely, and then after a few minutes he came upon a clearing. Before him, a river ran slowly by, and beyond that, some large rocky slabs jutted up, standing proud, as they had done for a millennium. Sean stared at the rocks. Something was not quite right. Maybe it was the angle at which they were set or the color. A thought began to materialize in his mind, but before it could form, a beam of light bounced off the stream, catching Sean's eye, and then in an instant was gone. Sean looked at the water. His mouth seemed very dry at that moment. Dismounting his horse, he walked to the stream, bent down, scooped up a handful of the water, and gulped it down. Sean stooped to get another drink when something made him look across the stream. He looked towards the gray rocks. Yes, there it was, a figure standing between them, or was it? His eyes strained to look deep between the giant slabs, but now he could only see darkness. Had his eyes fooled him? Had it been a shadow cast by the sun? He stood up, stretching to his full height, yet still he was unable to see anyone. "Gaius," he called, "is it you?" No answer. "Don't play games, Gaius." His voice softened. "I know you're there." Still there was no reply. Sean thought he heard a sound, boots on shingle maybe. "Ah, I hear you, Gaius," he shouted triumphantly. Sean sprang across the stream and ran into the gaps between the rocks. He slid easily between the slabs of granite, and his feet crunched upon the shingle below. "Come out, Gaius. I have no time for games," he said to the darkness in front of him. Sean now stood before a cavern leading into the hillside. "Come on, Gaius. I've much to ask, and I need your help." Still there was no reply. Sean took a few steps into the cavern. It was almost as if the walls absorbed light, for within a few feet he was in total darkness. Then, as if to prove him wrong, up ahead he could see a shimmer, as if fire shone against a polished black surface. Sean crept forward, quieter now in case the figure he had seen had not been Gaius after all. About 20 paces into the cavern, Sean noticed that there was a clear opening ahead of him. The steady patter of feet echoed around the cavern, then faded and was gone, as if someone had walked off the stony floor and onto a carpet. Sean moved on, his heart now pounding strongly. He was alert and ready to move quickly should the need arise. The cavern now opened into a large cave. It was almost perfectly round and about 30 feet across. The cave was well lit by 10 bright lanterns hung on the surrounding walls. Sean's eyes widened, and he stared straight ahead, unable to take in the scene that lay before him. It was not the almost perfectly smooth walls of the cave or the 6 tunnels leading from it that had stunned Sean, although on any other day that would have been more than enough, but the object before him. Standing dead in the center of the cave, about 16 feet in diameter, was a table. The center ring was carved from solid oak, while the outer third was walnut. The table was highly polished and glowed in the light from the lanterns. He had seen this table before, for it was his and came from his castle. How did it get here? Why was it here? 1,000 questions raced through his mind, none of which he could answer. Sean walked over to the table and placed a hand gently on it as one would when stroking a favorite horse or dog. He walked around it, his hand never once leaving its smooth, flawless surface. Now he knew he must find Gaius and get his answers, for he could bear the torment no longer. He looked up at the entrance to one of the tunnels, then along to the next one, which was the exit. All the entrances were exactly the same. There was not even a subtle difference between the openings to show the way back to where he entered. Sean had always been a logical thinker, and there were no thoughts of being trapped and unable to leave. I know the entrance is only a few strides down the cavern, he thought. I'll just take each passage in turn. 20 steps down the first cavern, and he could see light ahead. First time lucky, he said to himself. Stepping outside, he walked down towards the stream. Rain was falling heavily, making ripples wash towards each bank. Now where had his horse gone? Maybe it had sheltered a little way into the forest. Sean turned around to look at the cave. It was then that he noticed that there were no rocks here, no great slabs rising from the earth, and no other recognizable landmarks. Of course, he said to himself, I came out on a different side of the cave. He turned and walked along the river, following it around to where he thought the other entrance must be. Sean walked for a while but could find no other entrance to the cave, nor could he find any sign of the granite slabs. Soaked through, and fearing he would never find the entrance or his black mare, he decided to walk through the forest and head back to the warmth of his temporary home. Maybe he would be able to see the walls of the building he had left a few hours ago, or at least some form of shelter from the rain, which was now coming down harder than before. A storm was brewing, and the sky was rapidly turning black. As Sean climbed a short slope, a stream of soft mud washed over his boots and continued to the bottom. Sean watched its descent, then continued to the top and into the trees. Lightning streaked across the sky and lit the forest for a split second, then was gone. Sean cursed. He did not recognize any of his surroundings and could see no place to shelter. There was nothing for it. He would have to return to the cavern and wait for the storm to pass. He turned around, but the dense forest had closed in on him, and there appeared to be trees where there had not been before. Which way had he come? He looked on the floor to trace his footsteps, but the rain had softened the ground, and none remained. Sean cursed again. He began to run back through the forest, almost blindly. The cave surely could not be that hard to find. After a while, he slowed to a walk, almost exhausted, cold to the bone and aching. His body was not used to this much exercise, and he found it hard to keep his mind from the cold. Sean sank to his knees, unable to continue. Surely, after all he had been through, it would not end here, alone and lost. Sean blinked, clearing the raindrops from his eyes. What was that ahead? He rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand. Had he imagined it? No, ahead of him, a tiny wisp of smoke rose into the air. Sean's strength returned in a rush. He rose to his feet and staggered forward. A dozen steps or so, and he could see that the smoke rose from a small timber cabin that was almost invisible to the eye and, had it not been for the smoke, perfectly camouflaged. The cabin had been constructed with the logs running upward, so that they resembled tree trunks. There was no window or door that Sean could see on this side, and there was no path or other indication to show that the cabin was inhabited. Sean noted that without the wisps of smoke, the cabin would have been invisible. Without thinking about who or what the inhabitant may be, Sean continued towards the cabin. He cared not if they were friend or foe. He would die out here anyway, and so he may as well die fighting for shelter and warmth. Sean came up to the log wall and touched it to make sure it was real. He walked around the outside of the cabin. There was no door or window on this side, and so he rounded the next corner. Yes, there was a door. He stumbled towards it, almost fell, steadied himself against the door, and beat his fist on it as hard as he could. There was no immediate reply, and Sean was about to knock on the door again when he heard a bolt being withdrawn from within. The door creaked open to reveal a tiny crack and small eyes peering out. "You're early," the eyes said. "Well, come on, get out of the rain." The door opened fully, and Sean stepped through. The face that accompanied the eyes and voice was thin and wizened. A small white beard capped the chin, and the eyes were small and oval in shape, but they glistened like polished gems. The face beamed like a small child who had found a missing toy, a look that did not quite suit it. Dressed in a brown robe that was tied at the waist by a thin belt that buckled at the side, the man stood at about the height of Sean's shoulders. A frown crossed the man's face. "You're early." The man seemed bothered by this. "Early?" inquired Sean. "Early," the voice repeated as if an echo. "Never mind, can't be helped now." It continued. "Did you bring them with you?" asked the man. "Where are they?" "Them," Sean retorted. "Them," replied the man, the face frowning deeper, and added, "Do you repeat everything?" The eyebrows on the face rose. "Everything," it said with a smile. Sean was now 3 questions behind, and getting nowhere. "Wait," said Sean. "Slow down, let's take this one bit at a time. I think you are confusing me with someone else," said Sean. "I was caught in the storm, and all I require is a little shelter and warmth just till the storm passes." "Till the storm passes?" The man looked at Sean, sadness now in his eyes. "It hasn't even begun." That was more than Sean could bear. "You talk in more riddles than that damn Gaius," he stormed. "Please just let me warm myself, and then I'll be on my way." "Gaius was right," the man said. "You are still a little fiery." "What do you know of me? I've never even been to Aidenval before." Sean spoke sternly, as if chastising someone for listening to idle gossip. "Oh, I know all about you," the man replied. "I've heard tell of your deeds, your castle, your armies, and your kingdom, but that means nothing here," he added, almost as a warning. "You won't even be considered a knight here," he continued. "You're just one man, and you're going to have to fight all the way." "Ah, so it's a game you play with me." Sean looked at the man for a sign that he was right, but nothing came. "There's no war in Aidenval. There never has been and there never will be." This Sean knew, for Gaius had told him on many occasions how it was the only perfectly peaceful place in the multiverse, where everything lived in such harmony that there could never be unrest there. "That's true at least," said the man honestly. "If only you were in Aidenval." "Of course I am in Aidenval," Sean argued. "I only left." He paused, and he didn't know the name of the place where he had been taken. "I left a few hours ago and have crossed no borders." "Did Gaius not bring you through?" The man looked worried and said, "No wonder you're early." Back to the word early, Sean felt sure he was being led in circles. "Please explain what you mean by early," Sean begged. "And if I'm not in Aidenval, where am I?" "Come, sit by the fire and dry yourself." The man led Sean to a large, soft chair and threw him a cloth with which to dry himself. "I'll make a warm brew, then we had better find out what you know." Sean leant back in the chair. The conversation had taken its toll and used up all the energy he had left. He closed his eyes, just for a few seconds, to try to clear his mind. The chair was so soft, he sank deep into its folds. Warm and comfortable, and he let his mind drift, floating like a cloud drifting slowly across a summer sky. It wandered from Aidenval to Canchester, from Gaius to Giselle. Memories washed through his mind like the sea rolling gently up the shore, each wave bringing another memory. The first time he had met Giselle was when she had tended his wounds after the battle at her father's castle. Their wedding, where she had looked so beautiful. He could see the people looking at her and how they loved her. Philippe Badilor, his stepbrother Kai, and his father, everyone was there, everyone except Gaius. Where was Gaius? Why had he not noticed at the time? Why now, after all these years, had he realized that Gaius had not been at his wedding? Sean. His name drifted into his head and then faded away. Sean awoke with a start. In front of him was the inhabitant of this small but extremely comfortable cabin. Here, your brew. Drink it up and you'll feel much better. A mug of steaming liquid was thrust at Sean. He took it and gazed into the thick steam which covered the liquid below. What's in it? Sean inquired, unable to recognize the sweet smell that rose from the mug. Herbs, spices, and a little magic. A large grin broke out across the wizened face. Now drink up. Sean took a sip of the liquid. To his surprise, it tasted good. He drank a mouthful, and now warmed by the liquid inside and the fire in front of him, his spirits rose. He felt almost refreshed, as if he had had a good night's sleep. He adjusted his posture, relaxing in the chair, and fixed his gaze into the eyes of his host. Let's start at the beginning. Sean felt ready now to digest the information. Who are you, and where am I? I am Bronn, answered the man as he sank into the chair opposite Sean. And you are in the forest of Quell, in the land of Dresslon. Bronn turned away from Sean and took a strange object from a nearby shelf. He then took a small pouch from a pocket in his robe, and out of this pouch he pulled what appeared to Sean to be dried strands of a grass-like substance, which he pushed into a small bowl that formed the main part of the object he had taken from the shelf. The bowl itself sat on a tube about the length of Sean's index finger. Bronn picked up a taper that lay beside the fire, pushed it into the flames until it lit, then put the tube of the object in his mouth, applied the taper to the bowl, and sucked gently on the tube. The substance in the bowl flared momentarily and then appeared to go out. Smoke rose from the bowl, and Bronn, looking satisfied, shook the taper, putting it out, and lay it back down by the fire. He replaced the tube of the object in his mouth, sucked in the smoke, removed the tube, and gently blew the smoke into the air. Bronn seemed to almost visibly relax, as if a great weight had been lifted from him. He looked over at Sean, whose face was now one of total amazement. Sean did not need to ask. It's a pipe, said Bronn in way of explanation. A gift from Gaius, an amusing little thing, don't you think? Sean shook his head slowly. He felt that the conversation was about to slip away from him again. Tell me what you meant by asking me if I had them. Sean thought it best to ignore the pipe for now, asking, and what am I early for? Did Gaius tell you nothing? Bronn looked concerned. Nothing, replied Sean. One moment on the battlefield at Cadbury, the next in bed in a strange building in Aidenval. Over 2 cycles ago, Gaius passed through our land. He saw the carnage and death that was here. We begged him to help, but he was unable to. Even his magic could not save us from the evil of Krishia. Her magic is strong, and although Gaius is great, he was unable to defeat her. Bronn looked deeply into Sean's eyes. When he was almost exhausted, he left, promising to send a great hero who could bring an end to our sorrow. And who is this great hero? Asked Sean. He is called Sean of Canchester, and he is you. Bronn jabbed the pipe in Sean's direction. I'm no hero, replied Sean. What can I accomplish that Gaius could not? Legend has it that the only thing that can kill Krishia is the spear of Loris. But with that alone, you will not succeed. You will also need Lady Bella's shield, the helm of Othis, and the sword, Caliburn. Then all is already lost, said Sean, for all of these artifacts are lost from this world. No, only from your world, scolded Bronn, and you are no longer there. Then the artifacts are here somewhere. Sean sat up a little. If only it were that simple, replied Bronn. They are scattered in the 7 realms somewhere. You will have to venture into each realm to recover an item. You said there were 7 realms, but there are only 4 artifacts, Sean said. We know where not to look, said Bronn. The first realm is the cave of the table itself, the second is Aidenval, and the third is here. That leaves 4 exits to take. Each will lead to one of the objects you must seek, then you must return here before it is too late, for the final destruction of Dresslan is not long away. Why should I help? Asked Sean, although he already knew. What else would you do? A smile crossed Bronn's face. Lay in your bed at Aidenval. I don't think you would stay sane for long, my friend. He paused thoughtfully for a second. No, you need excitement, Sean, and besides, who knows what you'll gain at the end of this adventure? Maybe a chance to drink from the great cup and make a wish. Bronn looked at the glowing embers of the fire. What would you wish for, Sean? He asked in a soft, almost dreamlike voice, so quiet that Sean could only just hear it, or had he only imagined Bronn had said it? Fine, I'll help, said Sean. What do I have to do? Nothing tonight, replied Bronn. Just drink, eat, and rest, for after tonight you will know no rest for many days. Bronn paused, lying back in his chair, and closed his eyes. Tell me your story, Sean. I am Sean of Canchester, son of Patreaux, and my story is long, said Sean. I've had all night, replied Bronn, so I'm ready to listen. Sean closed his eyes and told Bronn his incredible story, one that, if it had not happened to Sean himself, he would not have believed. General Chrysak splashed water from the river over his face and body, washing off the blood of the men he had killed today and his own blood, where he had been wounded a dozen times. It was a miracle he had survived. 3 arrows had pierced his body, but not any vital organs. The cuts and stabs from swords and knives had done the same. The water was refreshing, and he stood in it, waist deep, allowing it to revitalize him. Looking around at his broken forces, he could see the weariness and despair that had crept in. He knew that he was lucky to have escaped with around 1,000 men out of an initial force of 20,000. It would take all of his strengths as a commander to bring them back as a fighting force. How did the Varsel army get so well equipped? How did they learn those tactics? And who were the warriors in green and black who killed so many of his men? Aaron, I have need of you, he called to a tall, stocky man close by as he waded out of the water. Pulling his cloak around himself while he dried, he sat by the fire and picked up the torn green flag that was lying there. Take this flag back to Avora and tell them what has happened. They will need to send their toy back. She will not be happy, Lord, not after Stroika. We did not summon for help before, it was her impatience. That city would have been ours in a few days, intact. Now there is little left to rule. I sometimes wonder if she even wants these cities or if her plan is something we will never know. The hunter rose from his bed, pulled on his leather trousers and waistcoat, then sat back down on the bed, leant over, and picked up his boots, which he pulled onto his feet and rose again. He walked over to the chair by the window, which overlooked the main street below. Glancing out, he noticed that the streets were empty as usual. Picking up the fur that lay across the chair and wrapping it around his shoulders, he crossed the room to a large cupboard. Opening the door and reaching inside, he withdrew a large bow, a quiver of white-tipped arrows, and a shiny sword, which he slipped into the scabbard on his belt. The bow and arrows he slung on his shoulders, and turning, he looked once around the room before heading out into the corridor that led to the stairs. Outside, he sniffed deeply at the morning air and headed north.